Well, it seems like a hostage deal has been signed. It's not a deal that is making anyone dance in the streets. There is much to agonize over the deal, whether it is which hostages are released and which are not, how they're going to be released, the slow pace. We don't know who's coming back alive, who's coming back dead. There's going to be much, much that is going to really test our emotional fortitude. So there's a few points I want to make about this. Number one, we are in the Parsha of Shmos. We're reading now the Torah about the hostages of the Jewish people in Egypt. The Jewish people were hostages in Egypt. God reveals himself to Moses at the burning bush in this week's Torah portion. He says, I want you to go to Egypt. I want you to go to Pharaoh and tell him you should release my people. And to redeem the hostages. So then Hashem says to Moshe, but he's not going to release them right away. Until I show him my strong hand, he's not going to release them. But I want you to go and tell him to release them. And I'm thinking, as this deal goes on and off and on again, off again, is this a replay of the original hostages being released? Is it almost a case of we're trying to get the hostages released, Hamas comes back and says, no, we want this condition, we want that condition. Well, maybe it is, I am not sure that it's happening until it happens. Let's put it that way. Maybe Hashem is hardening their heart so that they can be totally destroyed, which is what they need to be, is totally destroyed, and miraculously that we get the hostages out, even so. The other important point that I believe is important to remember here, and that is that I was quite surprised, disappointed, I should say, by hearing the role of President Trump in pressuring Israel to this deal. Many in the Jewish community had hoped and had faith that after the failures of the previous administration, the Biden administration, which they admitted that the fact that when Hamas saw daylight between America and Israel, that hardened their position, their stance. And because of that daylight, because of that distance between America and Israel and the pressure on Israel from America, actually caused Hamas not to come to the table and not to give a deal. In addition, the Secretary of State, Blinken, just admitted that Hamas has reconstituted almost to the level that they were before the war started. That's mind-boggling. And the way that it works is very simple. A lot of the aid that comes in, Israel only is able to scan for metal, for weapons. But they could send money. And money is coming in smuggled that way, and that's how they pay for new recruits. In addition, they have control of the humanitarian aid. So this humanitarian aid that is brought in is forced by America on Israel, is then used by Hamas to sell to the people in Gaza. In addition, they say you're not going to get any food for your family if you don't join our ranks. And that's how they've built up. So America is admitting that they caused Hamas to reconstitute. So after all that, we're hoping, okay, Trump says hell will be, there'll be hell to pay for if the hostages are not released, and so therefore there'll be tremendous pressure on Hamas. They'll stop doing humanitarian aid. They'll pressure Qatar, who is the insidious funder of Hamas, supporter of Hamas through Al Jazeera and through other means, and buying influence in universities in the United States and with many successful people in the United States with their money, and pressuring Qatar and says, we're going to cut you off, we're going to take our troops out. That's the hell to pay. So you better make sure that Hamas lets them go. Instead, he sends his Middle East envoy, before all the pro-Israel people in his administration, Mike Waltz and Mike Huckabee and Rubio and Hegseth, have a role January 20th. This guy actually was this is his Middle East envoy this time, Witkoff, has been bailed out by Qatar, some kind of real estate deal that he did. And he went to Netanyahu and pressured him to accept the Biden ceasefire from May, rather than putting all the pressure on Hamas. What? So that's very disappointing. Now, hopefully things will change once the people around Trump come in, who what we know are very, very strongly pro-Israel. But what it tells me is what we always know. We can't rely on anyone, not on Biden and not on Trump. We only have Hashem to rely on. As I said right after the election, don't put our trust in men. Don't put your trust in Trump. We only can rely on Hashem. It reminds me of the Gemara that I learned actually just now in the Tractate Yoma. The Gemara says we start our prayers in Shemona Esrei with the words Hakel Hagadol Hagibar V'Hanora, God who is great, who is strong, and who is awesome. These words were first mouthed by Moshe Rabbeinu. Jeremiah comes along and he sees those who destroyed the temple screaming in the streets in jubilation, reminded of the screaming in the streets that we're seeing by Hamas supporters now. And he says, where is strength? Where is God's strength when you see this? So he says, he takes out the word strong. Then Daniel comes along after 70 years of exile, and he says, where's this awesomeness? Look how the Jewish people are downtrodden in exile. And he takes out the word awesome. But then the men of the Great Assembly, as they start building the Second Temple, they reinstate his strength and they reinstate his awesomeness. Why did they reinstate his awesomeness? They said, look, even with everything thrown at the Jewish people, we still survive. And that's only because of God. As the Medrash Tanchuma says, Adrionos Caesar, Hadrian says to one of the sages of the Talmud, Rabbi Shua, and he says to him, there's 70 wolves around one sheep. How great is that sheep that's able to survive the 70 wolves? Says Rabbi Shua to him, it's not the sheep. The sheep has a great shepherd. Now note, it's one sheep and 70 wolves. It's not doesn't have a protector. There's no lion protecting the sheep. There's one sheep and 70 wolves. There is no one protecting the Jewish people other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu, other than Hashem. It's not anyone in the world. It's not even America. It's not Biden. It's not Trump. It's only Hashem. That's the only one who protects us. And we have to remember that, put our trust in Hashem and in our own strengths, what He gives us to be able to do. That's my lesson from this situation. Is the deal good or not? Well, we'll find out, I guess. It's certainly going to be gut-wrenching. And are they going to go back to terror? Is Israel going to lose many soldiers because we moved away from certain locations? That will make it easier for Hamas to attack them. I mean, there's a lot not to like about this deal. At least we'll get 23 live hostages back. That's to like. But there is tremendous amount of anxiety about this. For Shabbos, may hope that Hashem does what He told Moshe Rabbeinu, that He'll show His strong hand, and indeed will have the release of all the hostages and the destruction of the Egypt of our time, the Hamas and all those who hate the Jewish people. Good Shabbos.